Thank you everybody for joining today, or tonight actually. Tonight we have a very special triple team event with both Fusang, Bitcoin Association, and also Genesis Block. You might be wondering who Genesis Block and Fusang is, but we're going to start off with a quick introduction of the Bitcoin Association. So we are a nonprofit NGO that was co-founded and started in 2014. Our mission is to educate and try and to educate individuals in this space to understand more about crypto assets. The next company that is also featured here and trying to help with the driving adoption is Genesis Block. They have a location based in Hong Kong at Wan Chai. If you ever want to learn more Bitcoin or crypto, then just by all means visit them. They're very open, they're very friendly. And today we actually have a very, very special guest. Today we're going to be interviewing the CEO of Fusang. And you might be wondering, who is Henry Chong? Well, a little bit of background is that Henry is actually a PADI licensed open water diver. He's got a black belt in Taekwondo, and he's also got a degree from both the University of Oxford and LSE. Not only does he have that, but he's also the CEO of Fusang. So without further ado, I'm going to quickly switch the screen over to Henry.
Hello. That last bit is the most important bit.
That part. So
Brilliant.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Henry.
Absolutely.
Was the man who I've known for a few years now. I've always wondered and always seen you wearing this three-piece suit, and I've also now seen you wearing suspenders, for example.
I have always worn suspenders, or as the British call them, braces. You just couldn't see them when I was wearing a suit before, and they are amazing at keeping my pants up.
Thanks for sharing that. With a man with such style and also taste, I'm sure that this project that you're working on with Fusang is also an exciting venture. But before we go into what is Fusang, I'm also keen to understand about the name.
Yes.
Where and how did you come up with a name called Fusang, which I want to make a note, it's F-U-S-A-N-G, one word. It's not two words where you have an F-U capital S-A-N-G, but it's one word.
Well, that works as well in the Chinese opinion. You know, that's actually the perfect time to talk about it, because in 2 days' time, it's going to be Mid-Autumn Festival here in Hong Kong. And that's related to where the Fusang name comes from. A lot of people will have heard of the myth of Hou Yi, the archer. During the whole Mid-Autumn Festival is centered in part around him, and there's this legend where every day one of these ravens would carry a sun across the sky, and one day all 9 ravens took off all at once, and Hou Yi, the archer, shot down 8 of them. And a lot of Chinese school kids learned that myth and learned that because of his heroics, he was rewarded on Mid-Autumn Festival by getting the girl, effectively. But not many people know about where the ravens nested. So there was a tree far to the east in this mythic land called Fusang, where these 9 ravens purportedly nested. And every day, one of them would carry the sun across the sky, just like Apollo in his chariot. And when we were looking for a name to describe what we do, we thought that that was really opportune. Fusang, I guess, is the Chinese tree of life, if you will, like Yggdrasil. And we thought that it was a very apt description of what we were trying to build, which is that foundational infrastructure for digital assets. And that really is what Fusang wants to do. We want to build the lattice, right, the plumbing, upon which people can build all kinds of exciting things. And I'm sure we'll talk about this in the rest of this hour, but that's why we've built some of these platforms that we've built. We built the Fusang Exchange, we built the Fusang Vault, a custodial platform, all to answer this central question of what are the essential ingredients that are necessary for digital securities. And we'll talk a bit more about what I mean by that later. What are the essential ingredients and platforms that we need to build to actually make this a reality? Because I feel like, especially in the digital asset space, there is often a lot of talking, not a lot of doing.
I'm excited to hear more. And for some of our guests today who are hearing about Fusang for the first time, I thought that maybe a visual representation of what Fusang is doing
Yes.
through this image might actually help to explain. So what I understand is that you take an example like Hong Kong Exchange. You're essentially helping companies that want to get additional liquidity to get listed, and they have to go through a very stringent process. They have to go through a due diligence to make sure that the auditors can look at the companies to make sure that it's legitimate. The finances are not cooking the books. And what this image here is what Fusang is trying to do. It seems like a very ambitious project that you're trying to do, but why are you doing this? And it's so ambitious. Like Hong Kong Exchange is worth a couple billion, hundreds of billions of dollars in Hong Kong in terms of market cap. How does Fusang fit into this picture?
Yes. I mean, to answer that question, I think it's worth dialing back a step and asking why I think the world needs digital securities. You know, I think everyone in this call has bought into the concept of blockchain and blockchain-based assets. We'll really talk about that. But my personal interest is in what I broadly call digital securities. And what I mean by that is when you look at the share certificate of the Dutch East India Company, so the first ever company to issue a share cert to the public, the first IPO, if you will. And you can dig this stuff up on the internet. It was issued in 1606, the first ever share cert, and it was handwritten on parchment. But when you read it, and it's in Dutch, but when you actually look at one, you can compare it to a share cert of a company today. You can compare it to the Hong Kong Exchange Limited's own share cert, and it looks kind of the same, except one is handwritten and one is kept in PDF form. And that's where we are today in terms of how the underlying assets and securities are actually recorded. You know, a lot of trading today is already electronic, like the trade matching, but the underlying settlement layer is very paper-based and quite frankly hasn't really changed much in the last 400 years. And in today's digital world, and if you didn't believe in digital before, I think everybody believes in digital now, post-COVID. And in today's digital world, I find it mind-blowing to think that, you know, our most valuable assets, stocks, bonds, house titles, land titles, all of these things are fundamentally represented by pieces of paper. And I think that blockchain technology is uniquely suited in terms of taking those pieces of paper and digitizing them without actually having to mess with the underlying legal structure. You know, I think shares as a concept work great. They've been around for 400 years and they're fantastic, right? The world is run on these concepts. That's not the problem. The problem is the paperwork, right? The problem is the way in which we use them. And by digitizing these things and turning them into blockchain-based assets, I think we can start to unlock a whole new world of possibility. So the Hong Kong Stock Exchange is fantastic at what it does, but it runs a B2B model, what I call an intermediated model. The Hong Kong Stock Exchange has no investors as clients. You can't walk up to Exchange Square here in Hong Kong and say, I'd like to buy some Tencent stock, where do I go? Right? They say, no, sorry, we don't deal with clients. Go talk to a broker and they will come talk to us. It's a B2B2C model. Yeah. And what I find interesting about this is it's the exact same model that the department stores used to have. Right? Once upon a time, if I sold clothes and I wanted to sell them to my end customer, I would have to go to Lane Crawford and say, please, Lane Crawford, please carry my stuff and please put it in the front of your store. It was an intermediated model. Not just Lane Crawford, but you had warehouses and buyers and just layers and layers and layers of intermediary that stood between, you know, the seller of the clothes and me, the end buyer. And there was a huge and complex value chain. And then one day Amazon came along and said, you know what? If we can do all of these jobs and disintermediate this value chain and stand directly in between buyer and seller, that's quite interesting. Right? Amazon didn't really change commerce. They're still buying the same stuff. It still kind of all works the same way at the underlying level. It's the interface that radically changed. They disintermediated this value chain as a single platform. And more importantly, they provided a B2C portal where end clients for the first time can access almost like this massive world store. They can buy everything I want. Where before I was at the mercy of the intermediaries buying whatever they told me I should buy and whatever they wanted to sell to me. And that's where we are today with global capital markets. It is run by intermediaries. Even when it comes to retail IPOs, you buy what investment banks want to sell you. It's no different than Lane Crawford. And the hot new IPO is like the stuff that they put right in the front of the shelf, right? And the people who pay most for placement get put in the front, and that's what people get pushed. And I think that that model can and will be disintermediated. And I think that if we can allow issuers, companies who want to raise funds, to interact directly with their own clients, that B2C model, that becomes very exciting. Not just because it's easier and cheaper and etc. to buy securities, not just because you'll have a bigger spread of things to buy, but because I think you can start to rethink that model of who gets to be my shareholder and how do I interact with them. No different than e-commerce and social media. You know, it's not, e-commerce wasn't just mail all the catalogs, put on the website.
Yeah.
Right. Social media is not just, oh, we took the magazine and it's now on a web page. It's really redefined that relationship between company and customer. It's a much more interactive relationship and it's much more direct. And I think the same thing will happen to capital markets, where, you know, right now, every large public company in the world has a marketing team to talk to their customers and say nice things to their customers. And those marketing teams, they understand that you can't just run an ad in a newspaper and expect that that's what customers will believe. It is a two-way conversation. Right? Customers believe what other customers say about you more than what you say about yourself. But then all of these public companies also have an investor relations team that talks to their hedge fund investors. Right? And it's two completely different groups of people talking to two completely different constituencies. And I find that very strange. And I think that's exactly why people say, oh, company shareholders don't care about our interests. Yeah, well, because they're different people. So no, they don't really care about you. But if you can start to merge those people, you can start to turn some of these stakeholders into shareholders. I think that's quite interesting. Where we say, what does it mean where I can make the customers of my company, of my brand, who actually use and love my product, what if I could make them my shareholders? I think that really redefines that relationship of, it's not just me versus the company. The company's always trying to make more money, and I'm, you know, like a very confrontational relationship. It becomes a much more aligned model. And you say, oh, you know, if I am both a customer and a shareholder, now I, the customer, need to think about both sides, and vice versa for the company. I need to balance those competing interests.
So if I was to summarize my understanding, it's more about you're trying to help the capital markets be more efficient. You're trying to provide more accessibility to people that before had to go to a B2B model, and they might not be able to get the right information about a company that they want, because it'll be a marketing team pushing the company, it'll be an investor relations team out there. And what you're trying to do is to just simplify and streamline that whole process. I mean, just trying to replace the existing solution where you have Hong Kong Exchange and you have to pay billions of dollars, or even tens of millions of dollars. It's a very big feat. Now, I was looking through your website, and there was this one slide that I didn't really quite understand, but if you can maybe walk me through about what is this checklist for a traditional IPO process. Is you've got your auditors, you've got your legal team, you've got your investor relations, you've got your buyers before that you get listed. What is it that Fusang is trying to do? Because it says specifically STO checklist. Do we need to take a step back to understand how and why we're talking about STOs, or do you want to walk us through more about the checklist first and then STOs?
I mean, look, so, you know, Fusang as an exchange can support both private listings and also full-fledged public IPOs. And if you are going to do an IPO, quite frankly, the process, the underlying process is the same, right? You still need your legal advisors and your auditors, etc. And the exchange will still expect that kind of disclosure and transparency that any public stock exchange will expect. The core difference for us is that instead of us issuing paper shares and paper share certificates, and like I said, most people don't realize that behind every offering, whether you actually take physical delivery of a share cert, there is a piece of paper somewhere. Certainly in Hong Kong, it must be a physical piece of paper that someone someplace keeps in a drawer on your behalf. And that layer of paperwork means that, like it or not, we exist in this intermediated B2B2C world, right? So Apple doesn't know who its shareholders are. It sees a bunch of street name custodians on its cap table. It has no clue if you know, the end investor, are a shareholder or not. It's very separated. It's just like if I was a clothing brand putting stuff in link profit and I don't actually really get to see or interact with my customer. The big difference, as I said, for us is by taking those paper share certs and digitizing them, we can make that process much more streamlined, as you say, and accessible to a much greater pool of people. So, for example, if a company wants to do a fundraising issuance, like it or not, if these things are securities, the world of bearer securities, where you can just hold a piece of paper and say you own it, that's long gone. Every security in today's world needs to be registered in someone's name, right? A certificate, a share cert, whether paper or digital, must be bound to identity to form a share. But that process of identifying who you are shouldn't mean that you need to go to your local lawyer and get your passport chopped and all that, right? It should mean that you can go to an online portal and go through KYC digitally. It should mean that just like how, you know, if I decide to start a cupcake factory tomorrow in my home, I can sell, maybe cupcakes is a bad idea because it's perishable. I don't know, if I start a widget factory, right? And I want to sell widgets on the internet. I can throw up a website on Shopify. I can sell to a global community, and I can go to Amazon, and Amazon will help me take care of shipping and fulfillment globally. Sure. Now, the act of selling widgets, whether through Link Profit or Amazon, fundamentally is no different. Same stuff, same process, selling the same things. But if I go to Amazon, I can sell to a global audience in a way that I just couldn't before. Right? Companies could not dream of having the kind of global distribution that we do in today's world. And like it or not, like I said, capital markets today are very B2B. They're very localized. It's very, either you raise money from friends and family and people you know, or you go talk to an investment bank who hopefully will work with you after you pay them lots of money, and then they'll pitch you to their pool of clients, like Link Profit, right? So, and just kind of hoping that one day I'll make it big and I'll get into the big department store. I don't see any reason why people shouldn't be able to place their shares globally to their own stakeholder base, right? If you're a startup and you say, you know what, I make widgets and I have 50,000 people who love my widgets, why shouldn't you be able to fundraise from that group of people? Right? Why can't you send them all an email and say, hey, by the way, maybe I'm doing a private offering. If you're an accredited investor, click on this link and subscribe to my shares. Right? Go for an online KYC process, send me money, get back digital shares. There's no reason for us ever to meet. You know, it's so weird right now. The capital markets are like this lost stepchild, right? Everything else in the world has become digitized and disintermediated, and it's very flat in this world, right? You can start a business in your garage and sell online. You can communicate online through Zoom, right? You can talk to this global audience, but that's only half of the business. The P&L statement, so to speak. The balance sheet, the capital structure of a company is still very old school. Right? Why can't that be digitized in the exact same way?
So the essential vision is that you're trying to create a platform like the Amazons where companies, instead of having to go through the traditional, very lengthy, very costly, very slow B2B method of getting listed on Hong Kong Exchange and NASDAQ, is that's more like a Fusang platform where companies can go on, they can get more visibility, cut out the intermediary, and have a simplified version of listing. Because as you mentioned before, you had to have a physical piece of paper, but now everything is digitized, so
exactly.
It's streamlined.
And it's not just small companies either. You know, just like how Nike sells shoes on Amazon, it's not like they can't sell shoes themselves in their own stores, but they still want to give people that access so that you can go on Amazon and buy the shoes and get it in 2 days. You know, likewise, while we hope our operational process is more streamlined, it doesn't mean that it's just, oh, if you can't afford to go to HKX, you should work with us. We're working now on listing the bonds of one of the world's biggest banks on our exchange. And they want to do this because they wanted to obviously be a retail offering, but it's not like the rest of their bonds aren't listed on other stock exchanges. But they want to allow individuals to be able to come directly to our platform and buy their bonds. Where before, you would have gone to an investment bank and they say, no problem, minimum $10 million ticket, and sure, you can buy it. Right?
Yeah.
Why can't this be, I have $100 and I want to buy your bonds? I don't want to go through a broker. I just want to log into Fusang, go through KYC, and buy $100 worth of this bond.
That sounds very exciting. And going back to when I first came into the space in 2017, I rode through the wave of the whole ICOs and
Yes.
the STOs, and there was a bad reputation for ICOs,
Yes.
as you know. And then they came STOs, but there wasn't much traction around it. Can you tell us more about why Fusang is focusing on STOs? And before you do, maybe a little bit of background
Yes.
of how you define security offerings and what is a security offering?
Yes. Exactly. I mean, to us, what we are most interested in, like what we call digital securities or security tokens, are just where I take a share of a company, instead of having a paper set, I have a digital set, or a bond, or a fund, or etc. There's no need to reinvent the wheel in that dimension. A lot of people are trying to come up with weird and wonderful structures, often because they want to skirt regulation. To go with that, I hear a lot of complaints from both issuers and investors and platforms saying regulators are not sophisticated. They don't understand. We're waiting for them to catch up and then life will be good. And I think that's all bullshit. All the regulators we've talked to are actually quite in the know, surprisingly. Right? They know exactly what's going on. And they all say the same thing to us. They say, hey, if you want to do a security offering, no problem. Just follow our usual rules, and we'll be more than happy to support you. You know, some of these retail IPOs, they said, I mean, we file usual prospectuses with securities authorities, and they're more than happy to approve them because they say, sure, why not? Right? They have no intrinsic issue with the underlying technology. They have no issue with the blockchain-based assets. It just doesn't give you a free pass to not follow the usual rules. And like it or not, if you're trying to create shares and sell shares, there are rules for how these things work. But as long as you follow those rules, I don't see any reason why you cannot also have these as purely blockchain-based digital offerings. So to us, I mean, so we've done this for ourselves, right? We've taken our own equity for Fusang Corp, and we've turned them into purely digital shares recorded now on the public Ethereum blockchain. Anyone can go to fsc.fusang.co and you can see our cap table on EtherScan. Now, obviously, there are no names, right? That's just a list of shareholders. We take that list and we match it to an identity database internally to form the cap table and register members. But still, I said, when we talk to regulators, they say, sure, this seems great, right? No problem. Right? But if you want to do a retail public IPO, you need to come to a stock exchange like Fusang. No, you can't just sell to the world and do whatever you want and raise boatloads of money without any rules. And quite frankly, I think those rules are there for a good reason. Otherwise, we have, as you say, that whole ICO mania in 2017. I think the ICO wave was a fantastic proof of concept. They showed that the technology works, and they showed that people were really, really interested in what I call alternative value networks. So, most of these ICOs were based on not very much. And yet they managed to juice a lot of value into these tokens by being very innovative in terms of how you can use it. And that was great. But I think you should take those same concepts of how you build value networks and layer it on top of real world shares. Right? Why can't you do exactly all these things that companies are trying to do, but match it to their own equity? I find it very strange that most blockchain companies today say blockchain is the future, and that's why I won't sell you my equity. Right? I want to list my equity on NASDAQ. I'll sell you my token, but I'm going to sell my equity to a traditional stock exchange. Right? To me, it seems a bit self-serving. Why not just merge the two? Right? Why not say, hey, why can't we actually have our token be our own equity? It's not that difficult, really, if you're willing to follow the rules.
I think that's an interesting point, and the vision that you have is very big. And I think having vision is one thing, but the other part is having a team to support you.
Absolutely.
So when I was just doing a quick search on your
That's why I
website.
wear braces. The style is not enough. You got to keep your pants up.
And That's a funny point, but I also want to go to your team that's
Yes.
helping to support you. I mean, I was looking at your board. You have a former general, you've got a former ambassador,
Yes.
you've got a commissioner.
Mhm.
And then I noticed one of the names,
Yes.
David Chong, who's your dad.
Absolutely.
So with your dad being part of the board and him having skin in this game, as well as you yourself now being having skin in this game as well, having a family relationship where your name is there is a way to add credibility on there.
Absolutely.
And I think that being able to found a team where you've got very experienced people, whether it's Arthur, who's the CMO, or even Michael, who's your CTO, the team that you form right now obviously is very seasoned. But how did you essentially form this team together, and how much support are you getting in from the
Yes.
parent company?
Yes, absolutely. Look, I mean, I think it's fantastic when you talk about, well, let me talk a bit about the background first and the greater group, as you call it. You know, Fusang grew out and really why we felt compelled to do the things that we do today is that me and my family own a number of other companies that for the last 35 years have done what I call the plumbing of traditional finance. We act as company secretaries to tens of thousands of companies. We act as trustees, fund administrators, custodians, etc. All the really boring jobs that no one really cares about, but that need to happen. As I said, for every Hong Kong company, there are physical paper shares for Hong Kong private companies. Now, not many people believe me when I say this, because it cannot be in 2020 that you need to have a physical, like literal physical share certificate. But you do. And a company secretary somewhere needs to hit print on a printer every time you issue new shares, and they need to chop it. Every time you transfer a share in Hong Kong, you need to trot down to the stamp duty office, and stamp duty in Hong Kong is literally stamped, right? Title does not transfer until you get a chop. So there are all of these really boring jobs, but that someone needs to do to keep the wheels of global finance turning. And the truth is, when we looked at that business, we realized that it was based on lots of people and mountains of paper, literally mountains of paper, like you would never believe. And again, sitting here in 2020, I just cannot imagine that in the decade to come, that will continue. Right? I don't know how exactly the global capital markets will digitize. We obviously have very specific beliefs about how it will happen. Maybe we're right, maybe we're not. But I know for a fact that we will digitize. I can't imagine that in 10 years' time, we will still have physical paper shares flying around. Okay. I mean, look at this. Literally everything in the world is being digitized. And I think in 10 years' time, our kids will look back on today, 2020, and find it amazing that during COVID, literally the whole world was communicating by Zoom, and could, you know, your life can run okay online, and yet you still have physical paper shares. You know, like they're like, I don't understand how those two worlds could coexist. Did you not have the internet back then? Is what people will say, right? And you're like, no, you can stream 4K Netflix videos on your phone, but yeah, when you want to move a share around, you got to go find your paper, and you got to go to the secretary and chop it, and you wait 2 weeks, and this whole process. And that's really what brought us to building Fusang today, to say, look, someone is going to disrupt our business, we might as well do it ourselves. And what would we want to see if we were to reimagine that whole base level in terms of how it could work? And to me, as I said, blockchain technology is the perfect technology for doing that. I honestly think that it's overhyped. People trying to use blockchain technology the way that people used to say, use AI a few years ago, right? No, the truth is blockchain technology is not going to touch literally everything the way AI or the internet does. But for some specific use cases where you need to record data in a decentralized and trustless fashion, that's literally what it was designed for. And when it comes to recording, let's say, share certificates or the cap table of a company, it's literally the perfect solution. And we've tried to build the whole of the Fusang Group as platforms around that central concept to say, okay, well, if we can digitize securities, if we can move these things onto blockchains, what are the essential services that we need to provide people for this to work? Because I think, unfortunately, in our industry, a lot of people come up with really cool technology and then forget about the user, right? And the truth is, digital shares today are still too difficult for the average person. You cannot have a blockchain-based wallet and expect your grandma to understand how to keep her shares. It just doesn't work, right? And so our hypothesis was, okay, these roles that you have, they're not going away anytime soon. Banks and brokers, banks especially, unfortunately, brokers and custodians and stock exchanges, these roles can and will exist. And certainly because of regulation, they must exist. But we can start to rethink how they do their jobs in a radically different way. And certainly that's what Fusang is trying to do, right? To say, if we can digitize, if we can touch our customer directly, what would that experience look like?
I think the goals that you have is very ambitious. You got a strong team that's supporting you from the core level.
But sorry, can I talk about the team for a bit? Because you brought up something else about skin in the game, which I think is so important. Me as CEO and founder of Fusang, I hold the same digital shares, the same FSC tokens that all of our financial investors hold, that all of the 400 something people that you see in the scan hold. That's it. That's all we've got. And to me, that is literally the whole benefit of digital shares. Like I said, sure, they're cheaper and better and faster to transact, but that's the benefit of any technology, surely, right? That's a very thin benefit. The really interesting question is, what can you do with digital, in this case, digital shares, that you couldn't do before? And to me, it's precisely building this kind of alignment to say, when you invest in the Fusang exchange, I think, for example, we started to run some innovative programs. We say, hey, sign up for the Fusang exchange, we'll give you shares. Why not, right? I mean, we get value as a company if you sign up to our exchange. Why not give some of that value back to our users? And the shares that our users get are literally the same shares that I hold as an investor. Right? I think that alignment is critical, right? And likewise for the whole of Team Fusang. Right? I want to make sure that as many of them as possible own equity in Fusang as well, because it makes my life a lot easier as CEO. Right? I sleep easy at night knowing that we're all in the same boat, and hopefully all rowing in the same direction. Because I think when you see a lot of companies that have disalignments, right? When you say, how can it be? They just, I hate to mention a lot of banks, right? They don't seem like they're working together. They don't seem like they're going in the same direction, and they definitely don't seem like they're looking out for the customer interests. Why is that? And as Charlie Munger said, I think if you dig deeper, you will find that it's always a misalignment of incentives. They are not employees are not incentivized to look out for customer interests, so they don't. Right? People in different departments in the bank are not incentivized to look out for the greater bank's interests, so they don't. Right? And I think that it's a very powerful thing, actually, if you can align everyone and say we're all in the same boat together. And honestly, I think that's a large part of why we've been able to build such a fantastic team. I like to believe it's because I'm an amazing CEO, but I think a lot of it is just down to the fact that hopefully the whole executive team and everyone else in Team Fusang feels like this is their company too. Well, people act a little differently when that's the case. It doesn't have to be in a big way, right? But you just care a little more. Yeah. And I think that
it's expensive hiring people, essentially. I mean, you got to spend time trying to train people and retaining them. But
no, it's easy hiring people. It's expensive when people leave.
Retaining
you cannot build any great institution without institutional memory. Yeah. A friend of mine, Ben Quinlan, who chairman of the Hong Kong FinTech Association, wrote an article recently about HR turnover in FinTech in Hong Kong. Which I think is 100% right. And he says, hey, the turnover is so high. How can you hope to build anything? Right? If you really want to build a great organization, you need great people. And that comes as a function of people who are willing to really align with an organization's mission for the long term, as opposed to being short-term mercenaries. Yeah. And I honestly believe that it's not just because some people don't care. It's because you haven't given them the space and the environment and the incentives to do so. Yeah. And we take it as a given in startup world that it's a good idea to give employees shares so that they will be aligned. And I think that why not give your customers shares as well? Yeah. If anything, they're more important. Right? You have no customers, you have no business. Yeah. Game over. Right? So to me, it's a fascinating idea to say, what if we could make all of our customers shareholders? Right? That way, they would care just a little more, right? They'd pay just a little more attention, and we would also have a much greater incentive to be nice to them.
And I see ways that you're trying to retain not only talent using this incentivization method, but on that table, I also see a blue bottle that says Tony Robbins on it.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Tony Robbins? And
also
that's
says,
one way that you
focus goes, energy flows, but two cameras here. So, which I think is really important, because I see a lot of companies in our industry who also seem to have a massive lack of focus. No, we recently did a 4-day event in this very room, actually. I brought the whole company through something called Unleash the Power Within. Yeah. Go look it up online if you're interested. But I thought that was a great event, just because I honestly think that if you can help people become better versions of themselves, a company will flourish. You don't even have to worry about the details. Yeah. And it's amazing, when I talk to a lot of people about doing that event, the first instinct is, oh, what if your people become so enlightened and empowered and then all want to leave and do different things? And I'm like, that seems like a really impoverished mindset. I surely, if you have a whole company full of people who are, bringing their A game to work every day, even if some people decide to move on, you'll have an amazing company. And I think that's exactly the mindset that I think digital shares can change. I know it seems like a bit of a stretch, but I honestly believe that when you can democratize access to shares, you can really strip away all the barriers to access, and say you can start to place these things to anyone, anywhere. Anyone can buy in easily. It's not just a insider's game among a bunch of institutions, and I have that whole world of potential stakeholders out there who can become my shareholders. Then you really have to sit down and think from scratch and say, who do I want as shareholders? Yeah. Right? As I said, most people in Team Fusang are shareholders of this company. And so I care a great deal about them being, the best versions of themselves, because that's it. That's all our company is based on.
Yeah. So you've got a big problem that you're trying to solve. You've got a strong team. And it seems like this space that you're trying to enter into is very much cares about regulation and also compliance as well. So one thing that I noticed was that, being in Hong Kong, there's a company called OSL. They recently were able to get their license here in Hong Kong. And I was looking through your website and I was thinking, oh, okay, Fusang is Asia's first digital asset exchange to also get a license, but they didn't get it in Hong Kong through the SFC. They got it through Level 1. So coming from a place in Hong Kong where I haven't heard of Level 1 before until I looked through your company, my big question is, why Level 1? It's a place where you just pay to play, versus Hong Kong. The perception is that there's a higher sense of regulation. Can you share a little bit more about why Level 1 and what's the significance of that?
Yes. Honestly, for one very simple reason. As I said, when we were thinking about how to put together these pieces for Fusang, we knew that for digital securities to take off, we had to solve for a number of problems. And we had to be able to make it easy for both individual retail investors and institutions to buy into digital securities. We couldn't just do one piece of the puzzle and leave them hanging from the rest, right? So go figure it out with a MetaMask wallet. And the two essential pieces that we thought we had to build was, number one was custody, right? You need to be able to hold and move digital assets, including securities. And honestly, the storage is the easy part, right? I honestly don't think it's as complicated as most people make out. The hard part is the services around it. Just like if I went to a bank and they said, I'll charge you 1% a year to hold your share certificates, you wouldn't be very amused. You expect them to do all these jobs around it. Yeah. All right. Especially with the securities, a lot of stuff that goes into managing that. So we knew we needed to be able to create, transfer, move around these digital securities, but we knew that we also had to provide a marketplace where we could match buyers and sellers in a way that, again, both retail and institutional investors were familiar with. And the truth is that means that not signing for wallets, signing for transactions using digital wallets. It means having an interface that looks very similar to trading interfaces that people are used to. It also meant that we had to be able to support the IPOs of public companies and be able to allow those companies to be traded by retail investors. Because, to me, if you have digital that is less accessible than traditional securities, what's the point exactly? Surely there has to be greater access to more people. And that's why we were always very clear that we had to be licensed as a full-fledged stock exchange. As much as I talk about disintermediation, the world of brokers is not going away. I know the guys at OSL well, and I think actually they run a great crew. And we're looking forward to working with them as one of our exchange members. Right? We still need brokers and alternative trading systems to plug into our platform, to run these OTC desks, to face off with end clients, and then come and trade in our exchange. Because we are not, we're not brokers, right? So we can't, we don't trade on our own exchange. We're just there to provide the marketplace, if you will. Really like Amazon, or maybe Amazon in the early days before they started making their own products. But where we know that we can support just about any company and any assets. And we also know that we can onboard retail investors from just about anywhere. Right? And we will stand in the middle and provide a regulated marketplace and allow buyers and sellers on both sides to interact. Including, and we're very excited that some people like OSL are getting licensed, because for certain jobs on our exchange, I think as a listing sponsor, etc., we need firms to be licensed in exactly the way that they've been licensed. And that's one of our big problems right now. A lot of people have burgeoning interest in the security token industry, but unfortunately the players right now, most of them don't operate in the way that you would hope, financial institutions would operate.
But why level one? I mean, for those of people like myself, I had to go and Google where level one is, somewhere in Malaysia.
Yeah, a few reasons. I mean, so one is that we needed to find a jurisdiction in which we can do a lot of the things we said we want to do. We want to take shares and actually create them as digital native shares. A lot of jurisdictions like Hong Kong, while legally there's no issue in creating digital shares, there are operational issues. So for example, like I said, Hong Kong companies, stamp duty needs to be paid in person. You've got to have it chopped. So we could run a blockchain-based exchange here for digital shares, and the blockchain-based record would not be the final truth, so to speak. We would keep that record, and every day someone would have to trot down to the stamp duty office and get a whole bunch of transfer notes stamped. We'd be back to square one. There's no point. Hong Kong has a public registry and lots of other operational issues like that. It's not quite set up for what I call digital native securities.
It goes back to the problem of all that paperwork and
and look, so I mean, some people are trying to create alternative securities where they're not really a share or a bond or a fund. It's something a little different. And I think that's interesting, but the truth is, I think that sometimes it's a bit too complicated, right? We have shares for a reason. We understand how they work. The issue with them is the paperwork, not the instruments. And if we can just digitize them, and you can do this in a number of different jurisdictions, but Labuan is one of the few jurisdictions that is based in Asia, which is our home. There are lots of other jurisdictions like Delaware, for example, that is looking at allowing people to keep blockchain-based registries, but that's on the other side of the world. And I think there'll be plenty of people who will do great things over there in Europe and wherever. And Asia's our home. It's been our home for the last 4 decades, and we just want to focus on being here. And so, like I said, our criteria was, where can we do this? Not just talking and complaining and saying, come done yet. Where can we do these things today? And like I said, we've done it for our own shares. We're about to do it for debt as well for this bank. I think that'll be a landmark transaction where we show we can take one of the world's biggest banks and digitize obligations directly to their own balance sheet. So not just some thing floating around, but real bonds backed by them. And a place where we could set up a full-fledged stock exchange where we can, as I said, support public companies through a traditional IPO process, but allowing a whole world of retail investors to access this digitally and online. And I think the jurisdictions will evolve, and we will happily evolve with them. But like I said, Labuan has been a very good home to us. Malaysian regulators are not as fly-by-night as people would think. We actually think that them and the central bank. So we're directly overseen by both the central bank and the Ministry of Finance.
Yeah.
And we think that actually they do a fantastic job, and that the regulators there are very cogent and aware. It's been a great home for us actually.
So let's say that in Hong Kong or Singapore, there's a market.
Yes.
It's pretty big. For example, Hong Kong Exchange, it's doing billions of dollars a day.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a license in level 1, which is impressive by itself, especially being the first one.
Yes.
But even if you have a license, so what? Let's say that somebody's in breach of a license, or if somebody was to do something horrible. What is the purpose of getting a license if you can't enforce the license? Or why?
Well, the license is for people to enforce upon us, right? It's for people to say, who are you? Right? How do we know that when you claim you are running a clean and regulated marketplace, you really are, right? Okay, you have, like with us, we have rules of exchange that we need to get approved directly by the Minister of Finance. And so when we say, for example, that we don't fake trading on our own exchange, we got to do it. Okay, the license is there so that we are kept in line. And I think especially in the digital asset industry, a lot of people have a license fetish. They either get licenses, or even when they're still in the process of applying for licenses, they splash it all over the press and say, look at how great we are. To me, a license is a necessary but not sufficient operating condition. It means that you can get in the game, but so what, right? You need to actually prove that you can, as an exchange, bring interesting issuances onto your platform. Can you get real-world issuers, large issuers to trust you? Can you get real investors to come and trust you and trade and provide liquidity? No one goes to Amazon. No one goes to Amazon and says, "Hey, Amazon, are you regulated?" How do I know when I buy my table I'm going to get it? They say Amazon's a $2 trillion company, and I trust that if I don't get my table, they'll give me a refund and they'll stand behind what they say, because their reputation is so much more important than any license, right? And I think that is true of traditional financial institutions as well. Like it or not, people trust big banks because they believe that the banks have a reputation to uphold for whatever it's worth. Right? And there are plenty of licensed entities out there doing all kinds of naughty things in all kinds of jurisdictions. And I'll say the most important thing is, who are they and how are they operating? And most importantly, what can they do for their customers that uniquely adds value that you couldn't do before? I worry that a lot of people in the digital asset space are building cool technology without, as I say, figuring out what value they're providing to end customers. Exactly. If you can, again, I'm sitting in Hong Kong right now, right? I love this place. But if I take a Hong Kong company, a Hong Kong private company, and I want to issue it as digital shares, and I say, okay, I'm limited to 50 shareholders who are professional investors, and I can only trade shares in this way, what's the point, really? It's not that hard to do a paper offering to 50 people.
Yeah.
To me, the whole point of digitization must be that we add unique benefit to customers. Couldn't do with what came before.
Thanks for clarifying that point on the compliance and the regulation. Another word that speaks true in this space is trust.
Yes.
And I noticed that you do have a custodial platform.
Yes.
And I was just going through your website, and I was also comparing and thinking about some other early platforms as well renowned, like Gemini.
Yes.
Gemini Cryptocurrency Exchange, they blatantly list out on their website that they've got SOC 2, they've got ISO 27001. But when I was just going through your website, I didn't see any of that as well.
Yes.
Is there a reason for that, or?
Yes. Just like some people say, we found an auditor, so we must be great. To me, these things are all great to have, but they are in and of themselves not the end product. Like ultimately, the question is what are customers getting? Do they trust you or not? And lots of these certifications are nice to have. We have some of our group businesses that do apply for ISO certifications. Quite frankly, sometimes I don't think they're all terribly applicable, depending on what you do. And the trouble also is when you're changing as fast as we do, it's hard to get certified like this because people want to come in and look at some kind of operations that don't change,
Yeah.
right? And if you're constantly updating how your platform works in operations, it's pretty hard. But look, I mean, I have a lot of respect for Gemini and what they do. And I think it's fantastic that they did get these certifications to show people that some people out there are doing things right. But as I said, I worry that a lot of people in our industry have license fetish.
Yeah.
Right? Look, I got this chop of approval and I'm working with this partner, therefore it must be good. I'm partnering with IBM, therefore whatever. Right? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that these things are bad or that they don't help the platform. My question is just, how does it help the user?
Yeah.
Right? So it's Steve Jobs said this a lot, right? Like, you can build the best product in the world, but you should never fall in love with your product. You want to fall in love with your customer and ask what your customer needs exactly. I think it's actually quite dangerous to spend too much time just acquiring licenses and building up the platform and saying, okay, now who can I sell this to?
Well,
right?
on that topic, I mean, you do have a vault.
Yes.
And what I did actually see on your website is you might not have a fetish for collecting licenses, but you do have something called a safe approach, which I have not seen elsewhere before.
Well, I mean, look, so we get external security audits done, for example, right? Code reviews, penetration testing on some of our platforms. We do that because in those cases, we want to make sure that someone who's not us actually checks our homework, so to speak. Right? But it's less, for us, it's less about marketing and more about just, look, I mean, it's always good to have, whenever you build a system, you're very close to it, right? It's hard to step back and see the way a third party can see. So, the Fusang Vault, external platform or exchange, we have external source code reviews, penetration tests. I'm not sure we even publicize them really on a website or anything like that. Because again, to me, these things are just table stakes. If you run a financial institution, this is just what you need to do. If you are a bank or a broker, that's how the world works. It shouldn't be a selling point to your customers to say, we're not going to lose your money. HSB doesn't go around saying, oh, by the way, we've made sure that people can't hack our systems. People say, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do, right? You're my bank, you're supposed to look after my stuff. What value can you add to me on top of that? And again, don't get me wrong, it is mission critical to make sure that the platforms work, that they're safe, that they're secure. But so what, right? I mean, how are you making my life better? Like, why am I paying you money? It must be because you're delivering some kind of business value to me in exchange. Now, in the case of the Fusang Vault, we've specifically architected it so that, number one, people don't need to worry about interfacing with the blockchain. And that we are a completely centralized platform, right? You, the customer, never see your own private keys, for example. If you are looking to, own your own keys, you can do that yourself. You don't need to come to us. But the truth is, a lot of individuals and institutions do not want that. They want someone like us to look after their assets for them. And more importantly, for both the Vault and our trading platform, right, the Fusang Exchange, they want to be able to interface with that platform in a way in which they're used to. So, for example, for the Vault, that means simple things like multi-user accounts, not multi-sig, but multi-user accounts with policies. Right? Natively on the blockchain, I could have, let's say, like a 2 or 3 multi-sig wallet, but that's not very useful if I'm a company, right? Imagine if I was running, JP Morgan's treasury, and I said, yeah, any 2 of my finance team can sign for any amount and move it anywhere. That doesn't work, right? You need to put in place policies, like it or not. And likewise for the Fusang Exchange, hedge funds want to be able to trade with us using their existing brokerage systems. The truth is, they're not going to they're going to want to figure out how to use blockchain wallets themselves or directly just to make what they think is a few trades. But if they say, you know what, I can route my existing order management system straight to you, I can use the same trade routing protocols like FIX to route orders that I'm used to, okay, let's talk about it. Imagine if a stock exchange said, you know what, you need to build a whole new set of computer systems just to trade with us. Even the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, if they suddenly said, you need to build a whole new set of OMSs to trade with us, guarantee Like, yeah, maybe I won't bother.
Yeah.
Right? Like it or not, there is a certain way the world works and interfaces, and we think that we need to fit into it. Just like how, people talk a lot about Bitcoin as this decentralized asset.
Yeah.
Like, cash is pretty decentralized too.
Yeah.
I can pull out $100 from my wallet, I can give it to you. It's peer-to-peer, it's decentralized, it actually works fine. The thing is, very few people actually keep physical cash. You think about the physical amount of cash that you own at any one time, it's minuscule.
Yeah.
Right? We laugh at people if they have lots of cash at home, like hidden under the mattress. They say, no, you should store it in the bank. It's crazy, right? And I honestly think the same will happen with digital assets.
But here's the thing, right? It's about reassurance.
Yes.
In a bank, if Lehman Brothers, Lehman Brothers went down,
Yes.
at least the government would be able to guarantee and insure you up to 500,000 Hong Kong. But when we're listening to Fusang, which is a leading company in Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, the reassurance of, let's say, the custodial service that you have. With Bitcoin, if you don't own your keys, it's not your Bitcoin. And if, let's say, what happened with the recent Q exchange, there was a global effort to try and stop that transfer of illicit funds. But in Fusang, if it's centralized and you're dealing with STOs and you're not on this collection spree of getting certificates, but you're also doing penetration tests, you're trying to ways to try and secure your environment. But the question is, how can you reassure the audience and anybody who you're dealing with that you're secure? Because
absolutely. But for starters, if something really is a security, like a share, it doesn't really matter if someone steals it. Just like if someone stole your paper-based share certificate, it's not like we magically become the new owner. That world of bearer shares is long gone. All securities today must be registered in someone's name. So, and that's why Fusang keeps this off-chain registry, for better or for worse. We take these tokens, right, that are like your share certificate, match it against identity, and that's how we build our registered members. And so if in the unfortunate event that someone does steal or you misplace your token, we can just give it back to you. The same way that we would for a paper share. Right? The blockchain and these tokens are a massively convenient way for us to record ownership in a decentralized way, so that if you own Fusang shares, for example, and you want to send it to your mother, and as long as both of you have been registered in the Fusang system and you know where you are, you can send those shares to her. You don't need to tell us, we will know, right? I can in real time and automatically update my registry. Whereas for a traditional private company, you would need to come tell the transfer agents, you would give me a contract note, your mom would give me a contract note, you say, yes, I've bought, I've sold, we reconcile the two, we say, yes, this looks good, we do some paperwork, and 2 weeks later, we'll send you both back contract notes to say, yes, we have effected the transfer. And we can know your share sets if you want. Right? This just allows us to automatically update records. But it's not a bare instrument. So people, again, it's not, we obviously care deeply about security because it's not a good look if your systems get breached, but it's not the end of the world. Right? But more than that, I just, ultimately, as I said, people need to, I think about the use case. Right? So there will always be some people who want to keep assets themselves, whether securities or Bitcoin, and that's absolutely fine. But the truth is, the vast majority of people, I think, will want someone to help them look after it. And then the question becomes, never mind the licensing, but in actual fact, what role are you playing? And I'm actually about to publish a paper with one of my colleagues looking at the different kinds of legal relationships, for example, that custodians have. It's a bit dry, but bear with me. Just to give you an example of what I mean by when you say, hey, don't get fooled by licenses and dig a bit deeper into what people are actually doing. A few years back, Fusang started this working group at the University of Oxford, alma mater, to look at legal issues around digital assets, not regulatory issues. They're two very different things. Regulators make rules. Courts, at least in the English common law world, make case law, and through cases and judges' decisions, that gets updated. Now, under English common law, until a few years ago, it was not at all obvious if cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin could be property. Again, I won't get into the discussion, but in short, if they're not property, they can't be owned, and if they can't be owned, they can't be stolen. So in the Mt. Gox case, that's exactly what the Japanese court initially decided. These things are not property, therefore they cannot be stolen, so there's been no theft, so nothing to see here, move on. That's why there was no recovery.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, there was the technical whoops, we actually physically lost it, but even if, for whatever reason, they've been able to recover it, the court would have said, but you never owned it anyway. Really, you guys didn't really think that through, right? And so we think about these things in very physical terms in the crypto law, but we forget about the legal details, so to speak. And we've seen numerous cases in recent years where a lot of courts and regulators are very sophisticated, and a lot of them, including the UK Supreme Court, came out and say, no, we think these things should be property. But nevertheless, when you keep your assets with an exchange or a custodian, the question is, on what basis are they holding them? Mm-hmm. So if you give your assets to an exchange and the exchange is holding them as what we call a title transfer, it's now their assets. This, by the way, is how a bank works. So when you deposit money with HSBC, it's not your money anymore, legally. I know you may have a bank account in your name, but technically, you have given your money to the bank, and the bank gives you back an IOU. You say, I owe you your cash. Now, this is how the whole world of fractional reserve banking works, right? It's their money, therefore they can lend it out and do whatever they want. But because that is high risk, if they go under, you're not going to get your money back. That's why we have deposit insurance. That's why we have capital reserve ratios. And that's why banks are so heavily regulated, precisely to make sure you don't go under, because then people will get their money back. I think that if you're acting as a pure custodian, and this is the way that most securities custodians in the world work, you should be acting as trustee, right? You should say, I am holding your assets on trust for you. I am now the legal owner of the assets, but I'm holding them on your behalf. They're not on my balance sheet. They're not my stuff, right? It's not mine. It's just a service that I'm providing to you. And if I go bankrupt, they're not my assets for me or any of my creditors to touch. They're your assets. And it's amazing to see how few exchanges are willing to say that. Some exchanges, again, the guy's a Gemini, and I think they do a fantastic job. They even say in the custodial agreement, we don't act as trustees. So the question is, well, in that case, whose money is it exactly, right? I mean, these are the kind of questions I think people need to ask their custodians, right? Wait a minute, just to be clear, when I send you my Bitcoin, who does it belong to, right? Are you acting as trustee for me, or what is it? Yeah. You know, a lawyer will tell you there are only a few possible options. If it's not a trustee, the other option is bailment. I won't get into that, but that's not possible because that's for physical assets, obviously not this. Or it is an outright title transfer. It's now their asset, and they've just given you back an IOU, right? We promise that upon demand, we will send you back the Bitcoin. But while it's with me, it's mine to do with as I please. And most crypto exchanges and custodians want that so they can lend it out, so that they can do whatever magic they do in between. And they just need to make sure that when you ask for your money back, I have it there to give it back, and you don't notice. Right? It goes into this big pooled wallet, and as long as you get your Bitcoin back, it doesn't have to be yours. You just get your money back. Nobody notices the shell game going on. And again, not to cast aspersions on them, because this is exactly how banking works. Right? You give your money to HSBC, and as long as when you go to the ATM, withdraw it, something pops out, you're happy. Yeah. Right? And they just make sure that they have enough money there at all times. Yeah. And that's why you have this whole like overnight lending, escrows and refills and all that stuff. Like Fusang operates very differently. We run individual segregated wallets and accounts for each person. We act as custodian. We just hold your stuff. It's not ours. We don't own it. We hold it on behalf of you, the customer. Right? And in terms of how we are structurally designed, right? We designed it with very specific purpose in mind, to keep the customer safe, to make it easy for them to use. And that to me is what people, those are the kind of questions people should be answering, and not getting caught up in, wait a minute, you're audited. Audited accounts just mean that what you claim is true. Yeah. Right? And when you dig into these audited accounts, most of these companies say, yeah, it's all my money. And auditors will say, yeah, okay, chop, it's all your money, right? Exactly as you say it is. And like I said, I think unfortunately a lot of people in that industry are not necessarily looking out for the customer's interests. And I think, as I said, to go back to the point I was making at the start, no surprise, that's because they are very separated from their customers, like so many other big corporations in today's world. We even use that term as a derogatory statement, right? The corporate. I work for a corporate. Why, right? Why? Like there's this presupposition in there that it's us versus them.
Yeah.
Right? Oh yeah, there is the man up there in his office, and there's me down here doing my work, right? And I just come in, I clock in, I get my paycheck, and but why? Right? Yeah. We devote the vast majority of our lives to the companies we work for.
Yeah.
Right? You'll spend more time in your job than you will with your family or anyone else. I think we owe it to ourselves to feel engaged and feel aligned, like we are doing, we're part of something.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's why the blockchain world is so exciting, because for the first time, people saw the glimmerings of, maybe this means that I can be part of this value network, right? Like somehow I've got a stake in it. I suspect that's why so many people found that so exciting.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's why so many people, including me, find Bitcoin so exciting to say, wow, it feels like I'm part of something, like I'm part of a movement.
Yeah.
Right? You're part of the Bitcoin Association. You're part of a group, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think this has been hijacked by a lot of people who just say, how can I make money quick? How can I extract value out of people?
Yeah.
Right? And it's just become a get rich quick scheme, or I'm going to magic up a fake token and get money, as opposed to saying, wait, how can I use this token to build this value network and think about how I can actually draw people together?
I think that's a fascinating, another topic that we can spend a lot of time discussing, but I'm conscious that we're slightly over the time. If I can ask one final question, being the Bitcoin Association in Hong Kong, is you have offices in Singapore, you have offices in Malaysia, and also Hong Kong.
Yes.
You've seen what's happening in the past 12, 13 months. What's your outlook for Hong Kong, if we can focus on the positive aspects? And what I'm hoping to do this year is to also try and decrease the unemployment figures. If there's anything in Hong Kong that we can do to drive more companies to set up their companies here, can you share a few of the advantages of setting up in Hong Kong and why you decided to be based here, so that anybody listening in from anywhere else is, I need to set up somewhere in Asia, but do I go to Singapore, do I go to Hong Kong?
Absolutely.
Why Hong Kong?
First things first, you guys have a great Bitcoin wallet address. I saw on BAHK, and then your first title slide. But
you gotta thank Leo for that.
We're in Hong Kong for the same reason I think other people should come, which is that we think there are amazing people here. You know, I am massively optimistic about the future of Hong Kong, because I think Hong Kong people are a lot more resilient than people give them credit for, including Hong Kong people themselves. You know, I think there is, and it's nothing new, right? Hong Kong has this perpetual, almost like doom and gloom about it. Right? People in Hong Kong like to say, like, it's terrible, everything's ending. But actually, I think Hong Kong people are very resilient and very innovative, and they will weather any storm. So I have huge optimism for Hong Kong. And that's exactly why we're here, because I think that Hong Kong people have this incredible energy, and the place has this incredible energy. And we want to tap that as much as we can, including all the other places we have offices for the exact same reason. Right? We want to go and find people and talent wherever we can find them. In today's world, that is no longer centralized. That is all over the place. There are great people everywhere. And if you are out there and you are a great person, come get in touch with us. Focus on LinkedIn or something, because we very genuinely are always looking for what I call hardworking problem solvers. You know, what we do is new. Most of the things we do, no one has ever done before. We're very blessed to have an incredibly experienced team of people from all corners of the industry, including very senior people in the finance industry. But everything we do is brand new. So we are inventing things for the first time in many cases. And so what we need most are people who are willing to take a problem and work it, right, and help us come up with innovative solutions to a problem. And I honestly believe that if you're a hardworking problem solver and you have a group of hardworking problem solvers all aligned in the same boat, hopefully because they all own equity, there are a lot of things that you can solve. And so very genuinely, if there are people out there, have to get in touch with them.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, for your time, Henry.
Absolutely.
I know that there's quite a few individuals on this call as well,
Yes.
so I'm going to open this up to everybody on this call. Do be mindful that this is a recorded session, so please keep that in mind and be courteous.
Absolutely.
Everybody is
Anything and
time
everything, including you can make comments about the races, which are massively comfortable, by the way.
So if anyone wants to unmute themselves, if they want to type your questions, feel free to do so.
Hey, it's Leo.
Hey Leo, we can hear you.
Thanks a lot for the great interview.
Thank you.
I have some questions regarding what you believe will be the most successful security token offerings or securitized tokens over the next few years. Like, do you think it will concentrate on certain industries? Do you think it will start with maybe, so you mentioned your token or your way of securitizing your exchange for a few times. Do you think that ventures like that will be what drives these trends, or do you think it will be other industries or more assets?
Absolutely. Look, it would be remiss of me as an exchange operator to comment on specific securities, but I will say that I think there are two kinds of securities I hope will do well. So number one, the first thing is access, right? Right now, the crypto world and the traditional securities worlds are very split. It's like never the twain shall meet. It's not so simple to move money between these two worlds. Even in certain currencies, right? Bitcoin trades at different prices sometimes against different fiat currencies because it is not so easy to move the fiat money around. Some of the issuances that we're bringing to our market soon are very boring traditional securities. But we think that if we can open up access to people in the crypto world, that's very exciting. So for example, we're looking to list some of these things that are coming up in Bitcoin terms. These bank bonds that I talk about, they'll be tradable directly from Bitcoin into the bond and vice versa. So that kind of access, I think, is quite interesting, and just trying to draw these two worlds a bit closer together. But the kind of companies that I really hope long-term will do well are companies that don't just sort of take that first level benefit of, oh, now it's digital, so I can have 10,000 shareholders. I think they'll go beyond that and say, what can I do now with my digital share that I couldn't do before, right? So traditionally, shares meant I buy a share, I own some of your company, great. I think that, as I said, the brilliance of the ICO markets was that they showed that we could start to do some really different things and rethink what it means to be a shareholder. And I'll give you a very trivial example. Right now, I am a massive Apple fan. I own everything they make, like one of everything. When a new iPhone comes out, I buy it, I don't ask questions. And yet I don't own any Apple shares. I think that's a really interesting question. Why? Why will I tell everyone who listens, you should buy Apple product, but I don't want more Apple shares? Because if I bought Apple shares, it's just a financial investment. And as great a company as I think they are, I think there are better places for me to invest my money. Me, the Apple shareholder, and me, the Apple customer, are two completely different things. And if Apple could figure out a way to start to blend those things and say, hey, Henry, buy X number of shares and we will give you special access to our products, I would buy the shares tomorrow and not even ask how much, right? So I think that's a very trivial example, but I think more and more companies need to be thinking along those veins of what do we really do as a company? What's the value we provide? And how do we give back some of that value to our customers from whom all of that value derives? So like I said, another very simple example is we, Fusang Exchange, have started to give out shares to customers for signing up as a user. As an exchange, we are a marketplace. We need buyers and we need sellers. The more people we have active on our exchange, the more value we have. And so I figured instead of me going out and running, Facebook ads and paying Facebook X amount of money per converted user, why don't I just pay the user directly and I pay them in my shares? Because that way I think users have just a little more interest in what they do, right? They care just a little more, and we can start to rethink the benefits of being a shareholder. And as I said,
can any of us be shareholders, or?
So right now, if you want to subscribe for new shares, you need to be a professional investor or an accredited investor. But you can go to our website, and if you are, and go through the whole process from KYC to subscription. And by middle of next year, we're hoping to do our full-fledged retail public IPO. So then anyone will be able to become a shareholder. But they're already freely transferable in the blockchain or shares. But that's what I mean. Like I said, the ICO markets, I think, were a fascinating proof of concept. And Cathay Pacific, I think, needs to rethink its business model, especially now. It's in a lot of trouble, unfortunately. And I feel like, you don't mind me digressing for another few minutes. I think more and more companies have forgotten that if you can't build that sense of alignment with your customers, long term, they will drift away. When talking about that Bitcoin association, that feeling of alignment and belonging, it's hard to quantify, but I think it's absolutely essential. I think a lot of the great startups of the world, when they begun, they had this great wind in their sails because people felt like they were just part of something. I was one of the early beta users of Uber before there was even a map. And, it just said like 5 minutes away, right? But there was a little call button. And so all you could do is you said, right, it's been 5 minutes, it's not coming. And you press the button and you immediately got someone on the phone. And you said, hey, where's my car? Oh, yeah, swear, it's around the corner. Yeah, okay. And honestly, it was a terrible experience. They didn't have a lot of cars. And they said it was slow. It was quite expensive in the early days before we had billions to subsidize rides. But you felt like you were part of disrupting the taxi industry. And, you felt like you were part of the future. And every time I called an Uber, I just felt so cool. And I think they've lost that, Now I don't feel that anymore. Now there's no button to call anybody. I have to go for this, it's just, there's no support. And if an Uber doesn't show up, it's my fault as a customer, right? Charge me. And all of that just contributes to that sense of it's now me versus Uber, right? Versus being aligned on the same side. And I think that kind of ideology permeates an entire organization. No surprise you start to see things fall apart, right? Versus some organizations like Apple, who I think have huge alignments, right? And it shows. It shows when, you can feel it when an organization is aligned, and when people feel aligned to an organization. And most important of all is clients. Right? If your customers don't like you, they will, if they have no choice, they'll do business with you. Just like the truth is a lot of banks right now, right? Very few people like their bank, but you still use them because you have no choice. But the minute an alternative comes along, people will switch like that, right? And they will be happy. They'll be happy to switch. That's not a sustainable way to build a business. Versus some companies, give an example, Southwest Airlines. Not many people in Asia have come across. They're a US budget airline. But in the aftermath of 2001, obviously all airlines were struggling like they struggle today. And some of their clients would mail in checks to Southwest Airlines, free and clear, just to say, you know what, you've been good to me all of these years. I want to give something back to you. I wish I can build a company like that. When my customers care enough that if I'm ever in trouble, they'll say, hey, I'm going to look out for you because I think your company deserves to exist in this world, right? And my life is better because you exist. And as I said, I think that I hope, it's a very long-winded answer, but I hope the kind of companies that really do well and that do raise lots and lots of money through a security token offering are exactly those companies to say, how can I use this token to turn all of my stakeholders into shareholders, and so that we're all aligned. And I remember that a company is supposed to be a vehicle for delivering value to my customers. Right? Companies are not things, they are constructs. Fusang is not a license or a bunch of offices or anything. If all the people from Team Fusang don't show up for work tomorrow, we don't have a business. If all of our customers don't show up, we don't have a business. Right? That's it. We are just a collection of stakeholders who all agreed to come together and work together on all sides. And I really, really believe and hope that if used in the right way, that's what digital securities will uniquely enable.
Thank you, Henry. Leo, did he answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great, awesome.
Yes. I see other questions in the chat.
Arthur. Hello, Henry. Are you recruiting retail investors and brokers at the same time? How can a listed company use Fusang to list their shares in parallel with traditional stock exchanges?
The answer to both is yes. Yes, we are recruiting both retail investors and also brokers, right? Brokers are not going away. I think good brokers provide an essential service in terms of actually providing advice. The bad ones are ones who just provide access, right? And unfortunately, sometimes act against the investors' interests. But like I said, the original idea of a broker is to provide essential advice to help people, guide them in the decisions. And yes, both retail investors and brokers can come and sign up with us. We can onboard brokers as exchange members in much the way they would be onboarded to any traditional exchange. And to follow on from that, companies that are public right now can dual list on us the same way they would dual list on any other stock exchange. And the exact reason why we've always been so keen to digitize real shares, as they call them, instead of something a little different, is because I can take the same shares that are listed on, say, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange and just list them in digital form on our exchange without needing to touch any of the underlying structures.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Henry. Hopefully, Arthur, that answered your question. There's another question from Jay. Jay, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much for your time, Henry. Very interesting. I'm interested to know, in terms of the custody side of things, how many of, say, the top 100 can Fusang, how many of those can they custody today?
I assume you're talking about top 100, like cryptocurrencies. Very
correct.
Few. We do like 10 total. We do a bunch of the major cryptocurrencies because, quite frankly, I think of them as currencies. To me, our real focus for Fusang is trading securities, digital securities, and we wanted to be able to support cryptocurrencies to allow people with different payment options, so that you can move money in and out of our exchange in US dollars, renminbi, yen, whatever, and also Bitcoin and Ethereum. Likewise, where we have securities, you can also trade in and out of them in all of these different currencies or cryptocurrencies.
Thanks so much. And just to follow up, in terms of the, I guess, the fee structure around custody and administration,
yes.
Is there a standardized range there that you can sort of provide in, from a basis point perspective?
Yep. So right now, for the digital side of custody, we do it for free because I don't think that's where the value in the value chain is. You look at traditional custody for securities, it's what, 3 to 5 basis points. Crypto custodians now charge what, 40 a year, which would make a traditional investor fall off their chair. So no, we do digital asset custody for free. Come talk to us if you have assets you want custody. Like I said, we only really focus on the major coins and also securities. And that's the second part is really our focus, providing asset services to securities. And in doing that, we charge the issuer, right? So we can act as transfer agents, we act as company secretary, we can help you do your investor onboarding and sign off on that as a licensed financial institution, the KYC AML. We do banking, right? So if you're an issuer and you need to raise money, it doesn't help if I say, hey, I've created this digital token for you, good luck. Right? We need to be able to actually process subscriptions so that we can help onboard users. We can help collect money in either fiat or crypto on behalf of you to do those subscriptions, those kind of jobs. And money on the way out, redemptions, corporate actions, what have you. To me, that's where the real value is.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay. Is there anybody else that has any questions? If not, I've got one final question.
Absolutely. Make it a good one. No pressure.
We've gone through your team, we've gone through the
Yes.
concept, your vision, we've gone through this security resiliency. But at the same time, you're starting something completely new.
Yes.
You're saying that you want people that are problem solvers, but with such a new, innovative platform that you're building, why should people be Fusang's customer, and why should people join your amazing team?
Yes, absolutely. Just slightly different answers, but at the core the same, I think. I think at the core it's because part of what we do resonates with them in some way. Right? That's why I do things like this. I want to talk to people, and hopefully some of the ideas and the things that I talk about, trigger something in people. So that's really interesting. I want to be a part of that, whether on the buyer side or whether working for Team Fusang. Because as I said, we're like Uber in the early days. We have no illusions that there are a lot of frictions and that we have a long way to go. And hopefully people buy into the mission of what we're trying to do. They say, yes, I believe in the idea of digital securities, and that's what I want to go do. Hopefully for the I guess our investors, our customers, as we call them, they come to us because we can offer unique products that you couldn't get anywhere else in the crypto world. And like I said, I think in the coming weeks, we'll have some pretty exciting announcements about some of these things that will be publicly listed. And these will be the first time that we'll be able to take some of these real world products, bank bonds, have them be listed among retail investors and traded directly in and out with crypto, which I think is very exciting. And for our team, I hope they join us precisely because it is new, because they have a chance to build all of this from scratch. And I hope that people treat this like their baby too. It takes a very specific personality. And in the early days of Fusang, I used to spend a lot of time in interviews pitching to staff. I had that mentality of, well, we're very new, we got to get the best people. So I'm going to try and pitch to you and try and convince you to join our company. And now I do it the other way around. I usually come into the final interview and I try and tell people all the reasons why they really shouldn't join us. Because I say, look, chances are they're sitting there in front of me, it's because they want to join, right? They've already made that decision. And yet I realize that 80% of people are not suited for startup life. It's very cool today to work for a startup. And 80% of people will hate it. 80% of people would much prefer to work for a large organization where you have a very clearly defined path and roadmap. And you show up to work and you're told, do these things, and if you do them well, you'll be rewarded. And honestly, even me sometimes, I'm like, that sounds nice. Versus I think for many of Team Fusang, we show up at work and it's like, you got to figure out what to do that day, right? We're moving so fast. We've been, this is year 5 now. But even that, right? We built a full-fledged stock exchange from scratch, a custodial platform. We've had to invent a lot of core technology from the ground up. And we are working on half a dozen platforms all at the same time. And so I think almost everyone at Team Fusang shows up at work and says, what should I do today? Right? What's the best use of my time today exactly? Hopefully everyone has a clear sense of mission and where we're going and the important outcomes we need to hit. And we need people who are willing to help us figure out how to get there. Right? And the honest truth is we don't have a lot of space or room for people who show up and say, tell me what to do. I don't know what to do. You tell me what to do and I'll do it. Right? And that's why I always say, hey, you need to think long and hard about whether this is really the right environment for you. Because most people won't like it. Right? They won't find it very fun. But for some select people, the weird few people, and like a lot of Team Fusang, I think, will say, sounds fascinating. Like me, I don't think I could ever work in that traditional environment. I get fired. Why are you asking so many questions, Henry? Just shut up and do your job.
I think on that topic, when you mentioned about team, tonight would not have been possible without the people that are in this room.
Yes.
I also wanted to just give them a little bit of credit by turning it over. There's John, who's the CMO of Genesis BAHK, who's actually been standing there the whole time. Yes. So John, I want to thank you so much for being our cameraman, for helping to record this. And again, as being Genesis BAHK, you've been with us for almost all 7 episodes. So thank you so much, John. And I also want to thank Lynn Dane, who's also the BD over at Fusang as well. She's been very helpful helping to coordinate, along with Juliet, who's not in this room, but I'm sure that she's dialing in from somewhere else. Arthur, who's also the CMO of this place. We are in Fusang's office location. And again, thank you so much for the team that's also been part of here. So finishing off, Henry, thank you so much. And of course, the Bitcoin Association as well. So I gotta have that Bitcoin hat. Anybody who
don't forget that wallet address.
That's fine. we're an NGO and nonprofit. Yes. So for anybody who couldn't make it, we're going to upload this onto the YouTube channel. Feel free to share it or send it anywhere. But again, thank you, Henry. Thank you, John. Thank you, Lindane and Juliet, for everybody.
And if you have comments, let me know. And I always love to hear from it. Usually the best way to get in touch with me is on LinkedIn. Just ping me a message and let me know what you liked or what you hated. Is actually much more productive.
Great. So thank you, everybody, for your time. And we're hopefully going to have some more exciting interviews coming up.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Henry.
Thanks a lot, man.
Cheers.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.